Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is part of the good stuff. This one is going down a Sky and Telescope article on this 21st of January, 2022. And I am super happy to have Nicole Nazzaro and Derrick Pitts with us today. Hey, Nicole. Hey, Derrick.
Hello.
Derrick, where are you located at?
I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Philly. Do we have snow on the ground in Philly?
You know, we had threat of snow a couple of days ago, Frank, and there was a big, to-do and hubbub about how awful it was going to be, but then it turned out to be virtually nothing. So no snow yet.
Snow yet. And Nicole, where are you located at?
Well, I'm formerly from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I actually grew up right outside of Philly in Lower Bucks County. Bensalem, Pennsylvania is my hometown, but I have lived for the last 20 years on the West Coast, and I'm currently just north of Seattle, Washington.
North of Seattle. Wow. But you're not in Canada, but you're north of Seattle.
Exactly. There's a little bit of land in between. So, I'm in the town of Edmonds, Washington. So I'm just north of Seattle. Yeah.
Sure. Probably no snow there, but.
We actually had quite a snowstorm the last week of December. Ooh. Quite a snowstorm. It lasted for quite a few days, which is unusual for us. We're in a microclimate, so it's not normal. We don't have a lot of plows, so we have bigger problems with snow when snow hits than Philly does.
Okay. I guess we'll get back to whether you met Derrick in a previous younger life of yours here, but we'll get there.
Foreshadowing.
Let me take a step back and we'll start with you, Nicole. Nicole, what do you like to do with astronomy?
Oh boy. Astronomy was my very, very first scientific love. And I think that's just because it's so accessible. It's so accessible to young people. All you have to do is look up, right? When I was a kid, the Franklin Institute had, and maybe still has, you could call them on the phone and they would have a recording every morning and it would tell you what you could see in the night sky that night. This is way before the internet, way before anything else. Mm-hmm. The newspaper in Philadelphia also had a star map that they would publish every day. But there was just something about calling the Franklin Institute up. And the Franklin Institute, just so everybody knows who's not in Philadelphia, is a world-renowned science museum, an absolutely phenomenal place, a place where I spent a ton of time as a kid. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those lovely, wonderful places. And so, I don't remember a time when I wasn't looking up at the sky. And so now I have a 6-year-old, and now I'm getting him to look up at the sky and to think about, what are you seeing up there? And do you see the pictures in the sky? And do you see the way that you can see a dipper in the sky and things like that? And just watching him kind of wonder, what's up there? And it's just wonderful. I love astronomy as an amateur science. I think it's fantastic.
Very cool. Derrick, what do you like to do in astronomy?
Well, first of all, I have to mention, of course, that Nicole, I did those telephone recorded sky reports for years and took care of the map that was in the newspaper also for a long time. So a couple of ways in which we've connected there. The stuff that I really like to do in astronomy, right now, what I enjoy doing more than anything else is helping people realize and understand some of the complexities and the beauty of the universe as I see it. In that I see the universe as being having a complexity that's understandable. Actually, I don't like to think of astronomy as being so remote and hard to understand, but it's also really gorgeous. And I find that what brings me the greatest pleasure is helping people connect to astronomy in that way. Now, the great mysteries of the universe have always intrigued me since I was very young. This business about the expansion of the universe has been something that's been on my mind since I was probably 12 or 13. And so I continue to be deeply interested in those kinds of mysteries about the universe. On the other hand, the one last thing that really gets me about astronomy is the engineering that goes into building the instruments that researchers use these days. That instrumentation and the engineering is nothing short of not just incredible, but magical, absolutely magical.
Look what just happened with JWST, where we had this origami thing that,
Yes, that's right. That's right.
There's James Webb. That's
right. That's one really great example of that. The other great example that just has me floored is, our ability now to sample turbulence in the atmosphere and be able to subtract that from astrophotography from the ground. Wow. So we can essentially make the atmosphere disappear.
Adaptive optics.
Yes. Wow, it's just who came up with that? How did they dream that up and then turn it into something that actually works? It's just nothing short of amazing. So those are the things that get me about astronomy.
Very cool. And that is going to bring us to this very lovely Sky and Telescope, February 2022 article. And we will start off with this gorgeous illustration. Nicole, Derrick, take us away.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I just want to put credit where credit is due for Sky and Telescope for putting together their Astronomy for All initiative, for printing that in the magazine. I've contributed a few articles to Sky and Tel and actually read it as a kid. I believe it or not, I have a long relationship with the title as a reader, but got a chance to know Peter Tyson, who's the editor-in-chief, because he bought a few of my articles. And I saw this Astronomy for All initiative. And the first thing I thought was, gosh, I wonder what Derrick Pitts is doing these days. Because Derrick and I have a history. And the history is basically that, when I was about 15 years old, 10th grader, I was involved in the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science competitions. And I was looking for a project, wound up just cold calling the Felds Planetarium at the Franklin Institute. And I guess, Derrick, you must answer the phone. And so yeah. And I just said, I'm a student at Ben Salem High School and I'm looking for a science project. And fast forward a little bit of time, and I was on the roof of the Institute with their 10-inch Zeiss telescope refractor, looking at sunspots and doing a 10th grade science project on the correlation of sunspots and solar flares, which we all know have something like, I think, an 11-year timeline or cycle. And so he mentored me. I was at the Franklin Institute a lot, and then I went off and did other things with my life. And then I wound up coming back to the sciences in midlife and started writing for Sky and Tel. And then called Derrick up and said, hi, I don't know if you remember me, but about 35 years ago. And so I was astonished by two things, which was that Derrick was still at the Felds Planetarium at the Franklin Institute as the chief astronomer. And that when I did all the math, I realized he'd been very, very young when he had mentored me. And I was super impressed with just his incredible devotion to education of astronomy. And I just said, what are you doing these days? And he said, let me tell you about something called City Skies. And let me tell you about something called Mission to Mars, which is basically, both of these programs are essentially one-to-many programs that have been funded by NASA to get astronomy into the world of more children.
Good.
And Derrick has a vision for how he was going to do this in places like the Philadelphia inner city. And so I don't think I want to say a whole lot more, except to just give a real shout out to Peter Tyson, Gary Saronic, who is the editor of this article, and Sam Ward, who is the astonishing illustrator who did this beautiful photograph, which essentially is the illustration that illustrates the story that opens the article. I want to turn it over to Derrick and let him talk about what City Skies and Mission to Mars are all about.
Yeah, I'll just make one comment. Usually when we do articles, they're about an object, right? And so the sun doesn't talk, or the star doesn't talk, the galaxy doesn't talk. But the topic of this article, Derrick's Mission to Mars, talks and walks and is awesome. And so Derrick is here, and I'm really happy about that. And so just a little sideline there, and Derrick, take it away.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Nicole. That's a great introduction. I really do appreciate that. First, let me say that I really have to extend a huge thanks and tip of the hat of appreciation to Nicole for digging around to find me, to find out what I was doing these days, and writing this really incredible article for Sky and Telescope that does such a fabulous job of talking about something that I think is really tremendously important. The article was entitled Derrick's Mission to Mars. And the mission actually is to provide a way for so many others who don't have access to astronomy or to space science education content, provide a way for them to get there, to have an appreciation, to develop an appreciation, or at least see the universe in some regard in the same way that I see it, in its beauty and complexity. And, I always think that there's plenty in the universe for everybody and anybody to attach themselves to, whether you think you're into astronomy or not. And so I also need to say on that account, thanks to Sky and Telescope for being willing to publish this article, because it is really about providing that access and inviting more people to join this really fantastic adventure from places that typically are identified as places where you can't join this adventure from. You know, in a sense, this all starts on the premise that if you live in an urban area, there's no point in trying to connect to the night sky because the night lighting is so intense that you can't really see anything. And what I've discovered, and many others I'm sure, is that, you know, actually what happens is the night lighting in an urban area creates a certain kind of a filter that takes away all the background noise and leaves the, you know, the very brightest things. Yeah. So in a way, it's a little bit easier for some to read the sky, although you don't have the deep sky objects and all of those kinds of things. But for beginners, I have the basic stuff to start with. And there is that invitation to those people who live in those areas to become engaged. And you know, as many know, there's plenty to be seen. It's the bright stars and the planets and the bright meteors that go by an International Space Station. And let's not forget that most intriguing object of the night sky for people, and that's the moon. And so to Sam Ward about this illustration is really fabulous. And it's fabulous because it connects so many important concepts. You know, it's the concept of observing our next door celestial neighbor, the moon. It's inviting a very young person to have an authentic observing experience. And the parent of this young person is also part of this experience. Mm-hmm. And then I get to extend what knowledge and experience I have to another generation of engagement with the night sky. And, you know, I often say that anyone looking through a telescope at an object like Jupiter, for example, that first experience of seeing Jupiter, we all remember what that was like. And if we've ever shown it to someone else, we remember what their experience was like. And we know that that experience often is, you know, surprise and amazement. Oh, wow, look at that. And those people have a discovery experience. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, it's not that they're discovering Jupiter for the first time, but for them, they're discovering Jupiter for the first time. Yep. And I like to say that their discovery experience, that first time seeing Jupiter for them, is no less valid a discovery experience than Galileo's experience of seeing Jupiter for the first time. You know, this was his first telescope, but somebody else's first telescope. He saw Jupiter for the first time. They saw Jupiter for the first time. I can imagine the string of expletives that came from Galileo's mouth in Italian as he's seeing Jupiter for the first time, realizing the depth of the implications of his observation and discovery. So I like to extend that to viewers like this young girl who had such an expression after having seen this. And so for me, this image encapsulates so much of the work that I've been doing and working with so many others to do at the same time. That person that stands there behind the little girl, that's me, but it's also all of the other amateur astronomers that I've worked with that have provided an experience like this. This is them too doing the same thing.
Cool. Very cool. So let me
I have a follow-up question.
So Derrick, you have a history at least as going far back as when Nicole was a teenager. So how long have you been working at Franklin Institute, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. Actually, this is my 45th year of work at Franklin Institute. Now, I started when I was 10 years old, so there you go.
No way.
He was 18 when he was taking care of me when I was 15 years old. I was really touched by a story you told me, Derrick, when I was interviewing you for the piece, which was summarized a little bit in an abridged way inside the article about the fact that you did not yourself have anyone to show you the night sky as a young child, even though you already had a pull for the stars. You had a poster of the Andromeda galaxy in your bedroom, but
Yes.
you didn't have anybody who could show you the pathway to a career in astronomy, or a career, as you said, you wanted to be a pilot and you wanted to be an astronaut.
Yes.
But that those paths just didn't seem possible. But I'd be really curious to hear more about your thoughts about why these early experiences are so important for the future of the profession.
Right. So, when I was growing up, there were more typical career paths that were, within my vision, and career paths that were not so typical were nowhere to be seen. So I didn't have any examples, any role models of people who were in the sciences, science, engineering, mathematics, didn't have any of that. And so I was left to my own dreams about this. The reading that the readings that I was doing to learn more about STEM fields, my interest in astronomy. Yeah, you're right, Nicole. On my wall, I had a poster of what was identified, believe it or not, as the Great Nebula in Andromeda. Right? Okay, that's how far back how old this poster was. Right. But I had this fabulous poster that was a photograph of M31 taken with the 48-inch Schmidt camera in Southern California. And it was an iconic thing for me. And what I dreamt was, if there was any way for me to possibly work in some field that was connected to this, boy, if I could get to an observatory like that, it would just be, the pinnacle of achievement for me to be able to do that. But I didn't have anybody around me that could point me in that direction. I didn't have anybody around me who could point me in the direction of becoming a pilot, which is what I really would have wanted to do. And, if I had that opportunity, I'd be an astronaut for sure. I know that because that's the direction I wanted to go. But the intrigue about the universe pulled me and held me in a way that nothing else could. And part of it had to do with an experience I had as a kid recognizing the mechanics of the universe. And it goes like this. We lived in a row home in Philadelphia. If you know Philadelphia neighborhoods or Boston neighborhoods or Baltimore neighborhoods, you know what these row homes are like. Well, on the back side of the house, there's like a little side yard. And my bedroom as a kid looked to the wall of the next house, and it looked west. And what I learned to do was to use the courses of bricks as a clock, because I could see how the brickwork on the wall was exposed to sunlight as the day went on. So that was the first step in recognizing the mechanics of the universe and how, that wall exposure was then tied to the motion of the Earth in space. The second piece was that the street I lived on ran north-south. And across the street, there was another street that was at a T intersection, perpendicular to our street. So I'm on a northwest street. I live on the, just a second, I'm sorry. I live on the north side of the street. So now the street that's across, that tees into the perpendicular street, what I can now do is I can use the motion of the sun as it passes east to west, illuminating this perpendicular street as another celestial clock. And now, again, I have another piece of the celestial mechanics. Cool. And putting these things together, I now have eastern direction, southern direction, western direction. I have the motion of the Earth on its axis, rotational axis. And I also have the motion of the Earth around the sun as the shadows are longer and shorter during the course of the year. And these things help to solidify in my mind that there's this incredible mechanical works overhead that I can pay attention to. And that's part of what sort of engaged me about astronomy at that point.
Awesome. Awesome. And time went on and you shared this knowledge and enthusiasm with those around you as you went on. And it kept rolling over, let's say, maybe since you were 10 years old, the last 45 years or so, to the point where, you got a border 800K NASA grant to further this action of city skies. And I noticed here in the article that you're now branching out, you're going beyond the Franklin Institute. You've got a number of partners here, including one in my hometown here, Phoenix, with the Arizona Science Discovery. And so you have a number of partners here. You want to talk a little bit about these partners and how they're modifying the program that you got going at Franklin? Or
yeah, sure, absolutely. So the first, as you read, the first project, City Skies, is all about connecting, these audiences and these neighborhoods to NASA, using the incredible resources that NASA has available on its website. NASA recognizes that one of the most important things they can do is get more eyeballs to look at their website, use the resources, become connected to space exploration through what they have available. So the first grant was all about that. I tied it to the night sky as well, so that you have this connection of what you actually see with what's going on in space exploration. And that was a very local parochial program. We reached 45 community centers, distributed all these Galileo scopes and all this other kind of stuff, and created, astronomy resources in 45 communities. Great, fabulous. Now, this next project called Mission to Mars extends this program. We're essentially talking about the same kind of outreach, but we're doing this now across the country, identifying underserved communities through our through our informal science institution partners and the community centers that they are connected to. And here's the really cool thing about this. These partner informal science institutions have all worked with community centers through different kinds of programs of a similar type. So one of those programs is called Leap into Science. Another one of those programs is a Science in the Summer program, in which informal science centers partner with community-based organizations to provide science activities and programs to underserved audiences. Cool. So my thought was, hey, let's do this. Let's reach out to some of our partners that are already part of this program structure that we've worked in with them before, and let's just swap out the content. Cool. Let's pull out the science content they were doing before. Let's put in some astronomy, and let's put in space exploration. In that this time, we're really pointing towards NASA's Artemis program. NASA has this great new, effort pushing forward for exploring the near solar system, and we're gonna delve into that with this audience and connect them so that they might think about possible career opportunities, or at least education career opportunities, and how can they best connect to what NASA's doing and learn about how they might fit into this world of space exploration.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a really elegant program, because it really just takes advantage of things that already exist. You've got informal science institutions. That's a real thing, by the way, ISIs. I learned that term by researching this piece.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And it takes advantage of community centers, which are pretty much in every community around the country.
And one other thing that's in almost every community, right? The amateur astronomers.
Exactly. And people who are part of astronomical societies, people who are just independent astronomers on their own, people who just like me take their kids to go look at the night sky. And the resources that Derrick and his team have put together make it possible for anybody who loves the night sky to be able to just call up your local community center, or call up, everyone knows of a place in their own city or their own town where, it's an underserved community, or what we say in the article is under-resourced. We could go back and forth and have lots of conversation about why we don't have equal resources in this country educationally. And it drives, certainly as a mother of a young child, it drives me nuts. And we can sit there and be upset about it, or we can say, okay, what are we going to do about it? And what I love about Derrick's work is that it's just, we're going to use what we have. We're going to get more people involved. And that's eventually going to pay off in terms of representation in the sciences themselves. I mean, I think it's really obvious that we need more people of color in the sciences. We need more women in the sciences. We need more people who have different perspectives coming to the sciences. I mean, Pennsylvania, let's talk about it for a second. You know, that mRNA vaccine that is helping us get through COVID was figured out by a woman who wouldn't say no at the University of Pennsylvania, you know, over many, many years, because she just knew there was something about mRNA. And somebody in her life, I'd love to interview her someday, somebody gave her that spark. And that's what Derrick does with these programs, is to give people that spark. Look at me. I mean, I'm 35 plus the number of years I was when I talked to the first time. I still have a spark for the sciences. I work in a different field now in science, but you know, astronomy was my gateway drug. You know what I mean? Like, it just is.
Well, you know, and astronomy is going to be the gateway drug for many, many others if we can access them and if we can turn them on to this, essentially. And, you know, back to that illustration again, the little girl in that image is that audience. She represents that audience of where the genius is for whatever it is we want to do in space exploration or in astronomy. And since it's impossible to specifically point to some child somewhere and say, oh, this is the one that has the answer. You know, the point here is, you know, the United Negro College Fund used to have a saying that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Right. Well, goodness gracious, think of all the brains that are languishing without access to STEM activities and STEM programs and things. And I was in that neighborhood. I am that kid. And so many others were that kid or are that kid today. Yeah. And I just think here we have an opportunity to pull together amateur astronomers who are fantastic connections to the general public with their knowledge and experience and enthusiasm, community-based organizations that are always looking for new content to bring to these audiences, to engage them in activities, and informal science institutions whose mission is to inspire people to be interested in STEM subjects. So here we have this beautiful sort of like marriage of these resources under a sky that everybody has access to. Sounds like a great thing to do to me, especially when the person, the little person looking through the telescope at the moon steps back and says, it's so beautiful. I'm done. Do I need to do anything more in this career other than that? And isn't that also what we're all reaching for, is this opportunity to share this knowledge, to share this enthusiasm, and to invite others to join in this exploration with us.
Yeah, and I want to touch a point that you both made and is indicative in this illustration as well, is how important it is to have that spark go off early in one's life when one is a child, because that's what will drive you forward, to light that spark early. I mean, you can always get sparked when you're 45, 50, 60, that's fine.
Sure.
But it's very different when you're 8 years old or 15 years old, as the case may be, right? It sets up a lifetime of fascination.
When you're a child, the sky truly is the limit. Mm-hmm. I watched that in my own son, and you know, and honestly, Derrick, you know, I'd love your thoughts on this too. You know, the thing is that you want to, you know, kids will figure themselves out if we just give them the opportunity to do this thing. I mean, that's what I loved about that story about you just setting up the telescope and saying, you know, come on over, you know, that's the opportunity. And then some kids will be like, okay, whatever, you know, but some kids will say, gosh, you know, and then they'll go home and start thinking about it and reading about things. And you know, did you have a favorite astronaut in the space shuttle program? You know, like, I mean, I had favorite astronauts in the space shuttle program, you know, Sally Ride, obviously, you know, and others, but I mean, I remember Sally Ride. I remember the Time magazine cover with Sally Ride on it. And I was 9 years old, and I was a few years away from realizing that my eyesight would not allow me to probably enter the space program, which was a sad thing. But yeah, it's giving kids an opportunity to see that it is completely normal to be, as you said about your mentor Beth Scholl, unabashedly in love with science.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, she was, and she remained not only a mentor, but such an inspiration to me, even as my career at Franklin Institute blossomed after, 20 years at Franklin Institute, I was still in contact with her. And she was still an inspiration to me because of, the enthusiasm she had for this. And as, like I said, just no apology at all for being so deeply interested in science. And I took that on too, because that's how I felt. And I've not had any embarrassment about that, but now I'm, almost evangelistic about it in a way, because it is so exciting. I mean, come on, it's the universe. Something is exploding all the time. There's new stars and new planets being created all the time. And the universe is doing all kinds of great and wonderful things all the time. And, part of programs, one of the messages out of programs like this is to get kids to realize that there are incredible opportunities for them in places they may never have considered, looking into for possible opportunities. And maybe you aren't going to become an astronomer. Maybe you're not going to become a space explorer. But just imagine where you could get to if you run down either of those paths to some degree. Imagine what new concepts come to you for career possibilities. Imagine what doors open for you for career opportunities you hadn't thought of before.
Right, and I want to thread that a little bit with Sally Ride. And I think that's why it's important to have a diversity of heroes and mentors and people who role lead, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not everybody like me.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yep, very true. Well, when I think about that, I don't know if I said this to you, Nicole, before, but one of my role models, if you will, role models come from all sorts of places. One of my role models was a fictional television character. And no, it was not Ray Walston, the Martian, but it was Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. I'm sure that rings true for many people. And I think what it was about that character was that he was wholly invested in the science. Just wholly invested in the science and the truth of the science. And I just couldn't think of anything that would be more exciting than to be so deeply invested in it because of the way in which all of the sciences connect and relate to each other.
Yeah.
So, for me, that was a very, very encouraging role model to see.
Cool. Very cool.
So, this picture, Frank, is here I am out in a playground someplace, helping a batch of kids get oriented to what we're going to do, looking at the night sky a little bit later. And they were really very excited about this. And I was doing this at a location where the community center was really very much connected with the idea of providing this kind of authentic science experience for their surrounding community. The niftiest thing about it was that it's not just the kids that turn out to be so deeply excited about this, but it's also the parents that turn out to be excited about this. I had one mother whom, when I described to her what Jupiter, what she should see of Jupiter in the telescope in terms of the planet and its moons, her visual acuity was higher than that of most other people I had spoken to. And she was able to see things in the night sky that I hadn't been able to see for decades. And so in my corroboration of what she described seeing. And I tried to do it in sort of like a blind testing way.
Okay.
Look at this object and tell me what you see.
Yeah.
She tells me what she can see, and I know what it's supposed to look like. And then I relate to her that she's seeing what most people cannot see.
Awesome.
It then became a whole new world for her of connecting to the night sky. And, you know, I think the word that goes along with this, even for this adult that I try to do so often with kids, is empowerment. And so, you know, here's an opportunity working with these kids, not only to empower them in their connection with STEM knowledge and activities, but it also helps the parents feel empowered too about their intrinsic ability to connect with STEM topics.
So what fraction of parents do you think of those you interact with, like this is their first authentic experience with astronomy, like the first time they look through a telescope at Jupiter or whatever it may be? So the target might be kids, but I suspect a decent fraction of them, this is the parents' first real exposure.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. My ad hoc sort of estimate at this,
yeah.
And I use this number for the observatory.
Okay.
I've spent thousands of hours in the observatory hosting people at our telescopes. Mm-hmm. And the result of that is that I've come to recognize pretty easily those who have experience and those who don't have experience. As I say, you can always tell if somebody, you know, can actually see what they're supposed to see from through the telescope. You always hear, "Oh, yeah, I know you saw it." You know, so that's how I know my description was, you know, worked. But I'd say something on the order of 80 to 85% of people who come through the observatory, all ages, have not looked through a telescope before. Mm-hmm. You know, and that number may be higher outside the museum experience, because there's also that group of audience that doesn't come to the museum at night to use the telescope there. So they have even less opportunity to look through a telescope unless it comes to their neighborhood, which is the other cool thing about this program, Frank. I mean, this is about showing people that the science is in their neighborhood. It's right over your heads. It's right where you are. You don't have to go someplace to do this. It's right there. So you can connect to it without the big building downtown, without the equipment. Let's take down all of those walls and all of those barriers that might keep you from connecting with this. And let's do it right where you are. So I suspect that there's a group of people that in which that percentage is even larger.
Okay, thanks.
There's something about just, you know, reducing the radius increases the gravitational pull. That's just basic Newtonian physics, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, and it's in the article as well. I really thought through this. I just thought, what is Derrick doing? He's literally taking Newtonian physics and he's taking away the friction by making it, take away the friction. You increase you decrease the radius, because the radius between two bodies is a factor in whether or not, you know, what your gravitational pull is. And we know that obviously when your centers are closer, you have a stronger pull towards one another, right? Mm-hmm. Reduce the radius, reduce the friction, increase the acceleration. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? Get them there fast. 3 years old, no problem. I got a stool. I'll put her up on it. No problem. She's not too tall. It doesn't matter. I'm a 15-year-old kid. I don't know how to put something on, you know, a solar filter on a Zeiss. Guess what? He's got one right there. He's going to show me what to do. You know, I didn't have to. I mean, the thing I remember about Derrick from very early on was I don't think I had to prove my bona fides at all. Maybe it was just that I listened to your star reports or something on the phone, or, you know. But it was just, you're a kid. You want to do this? I'm a teacher, and I got stuff for you. You know, I mean, that's magic. It's just magic when you just open up that opportunity and then. And importantly, do it in places where we sit there and said, I mean, I almost wrote, I'm not sure if I made it to the final piece, was, who wants to be around a polluted sky? Why do we say light pollution? It's just sky.
Yeah.
Look up.
Yeah,
there
look
you
up.
are.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
You can see the ISS from Central Philadelphia every night, right? Remember that
Yeah.
too from the feast? Yeah.
Sure, whenever it's available, it's easily
Right.
visible. And I did this other really cool thing with kids that sort of helped to prove that point. One afternoon, one fall in the observatory, working with the 10-inch Zeiss refractor that you see in the image there, with me in the purple shirt there. That's a great telescope, by the way. It still performs really well in Center City, Philadelphia, even though the sky is what the sky is. You can see the tall buildings in the background really light things up at night. But nonetheless, it's still a great telescope to use. So I did this really cool thing once. I had a group of folks in the observatory late one afternoon. I think it was fall about 10 years ago, mixture of parents and kids. What I wanted to do was I wanted to point the telescope at Venus for them to see it through the telescope. Venus happened to be greatest elongation east or near that, so it was far away enough from the sun that you could see it if you knew where to look. It was nice and bright. You could see it with the naked eye if you knew where to look. So I did this. I pointed the telescope in the general direction and I said to the group, okay, here's what's going to happen. I need you to help me find this. So all of you look along the telescope, look along the side of the telescope out in that direction and see if you can see it. And when you see it, tell me where it is and I'll point the telescope at it, knowing what was going to happen. And what I knew was going to happen was that the younger eyes were going to be able to spot it before the older eyes could spot it. But just think about it. Here's the really great thing. What happened was, the kids found it, and the kids learned that they could find it without the telescope. And they learned that they could see it before the older eyes could see it. So for a moment, they held in their hands this great power of we can see this and you can. And now we're going to tell the astronomer where to point the telescope, right? And so following their direction, I pointed the telescope and then let them see it through the telescope.
Yeah, very cool.
Right?
Very cool. Very cool.
So this goes along with what you're saying, Nicole, about let's get rid of all the barriers.
Yeah.
Let's empower people to connect with the sky in a way that will engage them. And I've learned through through years of doing various kinds of science demonstration at Franklin is look. If I want to get the audience's attention, what do I have to do? Do something flashy. Just do something flashy. Don't ask them, what Avogadro's number is, or don't ask them about some principle or some equation or something.
No.
Let me blow something up. If I can blow something up, I've got your attention. If I can show you the moon in a telescope, I've got your attention. If I can show you a double star, I've got your attention.
Awesome. And I'm going to save this last piece for when we come out, because this is about people. This is a people business and engaging people. So before we get to there, we are going to touch on this, but I want to thank you both very much for walking through this very lovely Sky and Telescope article. And so before we end off, we want to touch on the future. So this is about getting involved and making things happen. So talk a little bit about how people can get involved, both locally and if they perhaps would like to be involved with the program that you have there at the Franklin Institute. How do we go forward?
I'll let you take this one, Derrick. You've got lots of plans, I know.
Well, COVID complicates things right now for us. We did have an extensive volunteer program at the observatory for our programs, Night Skies at the Observatory, that we've been running for quite some time. We hope to bring that back sometime in the not too distant future when COVID situation improves. And I'm always looking to engage interested amateurs who want to connect with audiences that want to learn more about astronomy for a first-time experience. These community centers that are around the city here in Philly can always host a star party and are always looking for additional exciting programming for their audiences. And astronomy is one of those things because, there are moon phases every month. There are planets all the time. There are 2 solar eclipses coming in the next couple of years. And who knows what else is out there of astronomical excitement to see, like the great planets of our solar system that always look really good in a telescope. And You know, it's great, satisfying work. So amateur astronomers who are interested in doing some of that can certainly reach out to me. And if you're in another community somewhere else around the country, you know, reach out to your science center. Reach out to your planetarium. If you are a planetarium or a science center, reach out to your amateur astronomers, the Astronomy Club or the Astronomy Association in your region. Now, not every amateur wants to do this, but there are always a few who are very much interested in doing something more than just the regular monthly star party. And there are lots and lots and lots of opportunities to bring the universe to these audiences in these areas that would love to learn more about the universe.
Absolutely. Very cool.
And you know what, I guess the other thing I should say here is I really do have to give a big shout out to the NASA Team 2 group who fund programs like this. You know, these grant programs make an enormous difference. The longitudinal study is very difficult to do, Frank, you know, where you do something now and then 10 years from now, check and see what the effect is. But I know for sure that out of these programs will come, you know, the next researchers and the next engineers and maybe even the next planetary explorers. So I'm glad to be part of this opportunity that the NASA Team 2 funding provides.
Very cool. Awesome. Nice. Derrick, Nicole, I want to thank you so much for spending some time and talking about your very lovely article and about broadening the appeal of astronomy. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Nicole.
Thank you, Derrick. Thank you, Frank.
And that'll do, everyone. And I hope this made your astronomy day just a little bit better. And we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.